Hello again, and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. It's Monday the 4th of September. I'm Andrew Wilson, and this is Scotland at 7. This evening, I have the latest daily update from Ukraine on day 558 of the illegal Russian war of aggression and imperial ambition. Then I will introduce our guest for this evening, and then together we will take a look at today's headlines from Scotland and around the world. Russia has launched its second attack in 2 nights on Ukrainian ports, with Ukrainian officials warning residents of Izmail to remain in shelters in the early hours of this morning. The Russian attack on one of Ukraine's 2 major grain exporting ports on the Danube continued for 3.5 hours. Ukrainian air defences shot down over 17 drones targeting the Odessa region, according to the governor, Oleg Cllr. He also confirmed that some drones got through the air defences. In a statement, Romania's defence ministry said Russia's overnight attack on Ukrainian port infrastructure on the Danube did not generate direct military threats to Romanian territory. Remember, Romania is a member of NATO. The abduction of Ukrainian children and their subsequent transportation to Russia is being investigated as a potential genocide by an independent international commission of inquiry on Ukraine. The chairman, Eric Mose, told a press conference on today that the commission is trying to establish what has happened to the children once they enter occupied territory or Russia itself. In his nightly video address to the nation, the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he planned to dismiss the Defence Minister Alexei Reznikov from his post and will ask Parliament to replace him with Rustem Umerov, the head of Ukraine's main privatisation fund. Alexei Reznikov submitted his resignation to the Chairman of Parliament today, and Umerov's candidacy will be submitted to the Parliament for its approval. Russia claims to have thwarted overnight Ukrainian drone attacks on the border region of Kursk and on the occupied Crimean Peninsula, with drones shot down by air defences. President Zelensky spoke with the French President, Emmanuel Macron, on Sunday to discuss the functioning of a sea corridor set up by Kyiv for the safe navigation of ships after Moscow exited the landmark grain deal in July. Russia is exploiting foreign nationals in its effort to acquire more personnel for its war effort in the face of mounting casualties, and probably views millions of migrants from Central Asia as potential recruits, according to the UK Ministry of Defence. Moscow has recruited 230,000 people into the army since the start of the year, ex-President and Security Council Chairman Dmitry Medvedev said yesterday. And Ukraine expects a boom in drone production as early as this autumn, according to its outgoing defence minister. Reznikov told the state-run Ukrinform news agency one reason for the growth of production was that authorities had reduced various regulations and laws. Now, we're lucky enough to be joined this evening by Councillor Fatima Joji. Fatima is the SNP councillor for the West Hill and District Ward on Aberdeenshire Council. She's the Deputy SNP spokesperson for communities on that council. She was born and raised in West Hill and has a postgrad degree in international development. She previously served on the National Committee for Women for Independence, and she's a pro-independence, pro-rights and anti-poverty campaigner. Fatima, good evening. How are you keeping?
I'm great, thank you. It's so great to be back on as well. How are you doing, Andrew?
I'm great. Thank you, Fatima. It's a pleasure to see you on Broadcasting Scotland this evening. Thank you for joining us. Our first story this evening is that on the first day back after the summer recess at Westminster today, the SNP formally moved the writ to hold the Rutherglen and Hamilton West by-election, which will now take place on Thursday, the 5th of October. Commenting, the SNP's Westminster leader, Stephen Flynn MP, said, "The people of Rutherglen and Hamilton West deserve to have this by-election as soon as possible, so they can vote and send a strong MP to Westminster that will truly stand up for them and against the cruel Tory policies that Labour now supports. The SNP have a fantastic candidate in Katie Loudon, who has a proven track record in the constituency. The SNP know exactly what we stand for and will fight for every single vote, as we always do. By contrast, the pro-Brexit Labour Party are taking the people of Rutherglen and Hamilton West for granted by arrogantly acting like they have this election in the bag. with Sir Keir Starmer having ruled out ever rejoining the EU and backing Tory policies including the cruel two-child cap and rape clause, people are asking, what is the point of Labour? So, Fatima, the by-election has been billed as a straight fight between the SNP and British Labour. Do you think it will be as straightforward as that? The Scottish Greens and the ISP are standing candidates, and I know that so far the Scottish Socialist Party, Volt UK, the Scottish Trade Unionist and Socialist Coalition, and Reform UK will also be standing candidates.
I mean, every party has a right to stand a candidate, and in our own SNP candidate, we have Katie Loudon, who is credible, fantastic, has been in and day out campaigning on the streets and making that cause very clear. She is a strong candidate, and I do believe that when Katie enters Westminster, she will be there running from the ground up and actually do something for what the Rutherglen and people want as well. So I'm not worried about any other candidate standing. Our focus is on the SNP delivering for the area, and I have every faith and trust in Katie to do that, exactly that.
Thanks, Fatima. Now, there's been something of a phony war over the summer months, and before the writ was moved today, and during that phony war, something like 18 English Labour MPs have campaigned in Rutherglen and West Hamilton. Do you think that campaigning like that in Lanarkshire, they've been campaigning in a way that makes it look like they think that coming to Lanarkshire to campaign Lanarkshire some sort of colony or a weekend break location for them. So do you think is that kind of campaigning relying so heavily on bussing in campaigners, is that going to work for British Labour in Lanarkshire?
Absolutely not, because I mean, people are concerned about the cost of living crisis. That's at the front of their mind. People are realizing very quickly that Westminster is not delivering for the area. So it's really the policies and politics and the candidate that they're going to focus on. And Labour have shown that they're just taking it as a win for them already. They're very complacent, whereas Katie has been there standing her ground, being very clear with her policies. So what Labour is doing just for show, just the theatrics, I don't think many people are going to buy it at all compared to what Katie's doing.
Thanks, Fatima. And as Labour at Westminster reshuffles onto an election footing, and we'll talk about that more later on this evening, is that reshuffling going to make it easier or worse for their candidate in this by-election? He's already spent the summer denying or rejecting Labour Party policies, such as maintaining the two-child cap and the rape clause, and his supposed boss, Anna Sarwar, said his team will continue to oppose the two-child cap, regardless of what London does. So, firstly, what does that even mean? And secondly, how is the British Labour candidate in Rutherglen and West Hamilton going to cope with the constant stresses and strains of policies in England not being the same as party policies in Scotland?
I think Labour has consistently shown that they're just a branch office when it comes to the UK government that's really controlling them. And there's no consistency in Labour politics and policies. It's just constant U-turns. And I think the candidate has just further emphasised how Labour cannot be trusted to deliver on one message, on a clear message at all. Even everyone is noticing how contrasting these policies are. They don't know, they're not giving voters any clear line on what to vote for. And no one is going to want to vote for a candidate that's so confused with the policies at national level. And that's clearly departing from a lot of them. The Labour that everyone would expect is not the Labour that exists today. And neither the national level politics, the UK wide politics, and neither the candidate are helping on this messaging. So everyone has a right to decide on a candidate that's actually giving a clear message. And to me, the only candidate that's doing that is Katie.
Thanks, Fatima. And thinking back a little bit, in 2019, when Margaret Ferrier won the seat back from Labour's Jed Killen, there was a turnout of 66.5%. Ms Ferrier, who had herself been ousted by Killen 2 years earlier, secured a majority of 5,240 with 44.2% of the vote. Compared to his 34.5%. The Tories finished on 15%, the Lib Dems on 5.2%, and UKIP on 1.2%, and they lost their deposit. So, given that there's a much larger field running at this by-election than at the last general election, how do you think it's going to play out? Are we going to see how is it going to play out in terms of the turnout, and how do you think the cards are going to fall with such a large number of candidates standing?
Well, I think we also need to consider that there's a lot that's happening just now that's bringing to the forefront the issues that we have. It does take time for when policies such as disastrous ones like the UK government has imposed, it does take time for people to actually translate in the ground for the people to actually feel it. So I feel there's a lot more understanding about what's happening. People are actually feeling it day in and day out. And I do believe that everyone out there in Katie's constituency is actually recognizing that there is a problem that needs to be solved. And Katie's one of the right candidates to do that. In terms of the question you asked about how many, we've got so many candidates standing. Well, to be honest, I might cheekily say that there might be a few more deposits lost as well. But I also believe in the power of democracy and giving people a choice. And it's up to the candidates to really demonstrate what they're offering the people. And every person has a right to decide what policies are best suited to the fears and the concerns and the future that they want. I am absolutely not worried about Katie and the strength and the stamina that she's bringing to this election. So that's who my focus is on. And I do believe that Katie does have it in the bag.
Thanks, Fatima. That was some great insight there. We'll move on now because Stephen Flynn has announced a reshuffle of his front bench team with a renewed focus on the cost of living, energy and economic growth as the SNP ramps up its preparations ahead of a general election which is expected next year. The SNP Westminster leader has said that his team will pile pressure on the UK government to help families with the cost of living, while renewing the positive case for independence in Europe and investment in Scotland's enormous renewable energy potential as the best route to securing strong and sustained economic growth. The reshuffle sees Drew Hendry MP take over as economy spokesperson and Dave Duggan MP take over as energy spokesperson. It also ensures representation from communities across Scotland and more women promoted, with Amy Callaghan MP joining the front bench as health spokesperson and Anam Kazar MP taking over as Levelling Up spokesperson. Tommy Shepherd takes over as the Scotland spokesperson, while David Linden MP, Alison Thulis MP, Alan Smith and Kirsten Oswald MP are among those staying in place as social justice spokesperson, home affairs spokesperson, Europe and EU accession spokesperson and women and equality spokesperson, respectively. Commenting, the SNP's Westminster leader Stephen Flynn said the SNP's new front bench team will pile pressure on the UK government to help families with the cost of living while renewing the positive case for independence in Europe and investment in Scotland's enormous renewable energy potential as the best route for securing strong and sustained economic growth. The Tories trashed the UK economy, and it's increasingly clear the Tory-light Labour Party is offering no change from the disastrous policies that got the UK into this mess. Under Sir Keir Starmer, they back Brexit, austerity cuts and creeping privatisation of the NHS, which will take the UK down the path to long-term decline and hammer the incomes of families in Scotland. The SNP is the party with a plan to deliver strong economic growth and to reduce the cost of living. Scotland is an energy-rich country with huge resources. By rejoining the EU and investing in the renewable energy gold rush, we can build a wealthier, greener and fairer future. He went on, over the coming months, my new team will continue to put the Westminster-made cost of living crisis at the forefront of our work, and we will make the case that voting SNP is the only way to secure independence, boost the economy, and deliver the real hope and real change the public so badly deserve. The full list of changes to the SNP Westminster front bench team is as follows. The new Chief Whip is Owen Thompson. The economy spokesperson is Drew Hendry. The Levelling Up spokesperson is Anam Kazar. The Justice and Immigration spokesperson is now Chris Stevens. Tommy Shepherd is the Scotland spokesperson. Anne McLaughlin is the International Development spokesperson. Brendan O'Hara will now be the spokesperson on Foreign Affairs. Amy Callaghan is the Health spokesperson. Dave Duggan is the Energy, Security and Net Zero spokesperson. And Martin Docherty-Hughes is now the Defence spokesperson. So Fatima, in some sense, some sort of reshuffle was inevitable, at least after Angus Brendan McNeill, who led on Foreign Affairs, left the party. So in these announcements made by Stephen Flynn today, any particular highlights for you?
I am glad that you referred to the whole diversity of the cabinet. I am very pleased to see the geographical spread on the front bench. And, I'm also very pleased as someone who advocates for more women to be in politics because I do believe this diversity in gender, in viewpoints, actually enriches our policies. So to see more capable women promoted to the front bench as well is fantastic. And true to form, Stephen has already launched into action with his strong team, proving we are the opposition that holds the UK government and their poverty-inducing policies and politics to account. In terms of any noticeable things that have drawn my attention, as from the Northeast, I'm always keen to know who's our energy spokesperson is going to be. So I think a lot of eyes will be on Dave Dugan and very keen to see his work there because it is a portfolio that's highly relevant to the Northeast, and energy brief as well is something that's being talked about constantly in terms of addressing the cost of living crisis, because up here in Scotland we are an energy rich country that's seeing fuel poverty, which makes absolutely no sense and just shows that Westminster control is damaging for what's happening. So I'm interested to see how Dave Dugan holds the fire under their feet in terms with this portfolio. So that's something that stood out to me, and that's one that we will be looking from the Northeast based on the portfolio that he has.
Thanks, Fatima. And we've spoken about the SNP's reshuffle. We'll talk about the Labour reshuffle in a moment. But does this amount of reshuffling indicate now that, as some Tory commentators were saying last week, that most parties think that a general election is now due in about 12 months' time?
I mean, it is expected, and that we will be due a general election around that time, and it is expected for parties to start reshuffling their cabinets in order to prepare for that. And as we saw in the reports, Stephen Flynn did mention that they are shuffling the cabinet to be general election ready. And you will notice that those who are not standing again are no longer on the front bench. So he's brought everyone who will be returning and making use of their voices on their policies, on the politics, and really that strong team. So it is expected. I do believe that a general election could be called in the next 12 months. And we campaign for it. I mean, we're not taking any vote for granted here in the SNP. So we're looking forward to that general election happen, and we're not scared of it at all.
Thanks, Fatima. And you make an interesting point I wanted to touch on with you. There's been some discussion over the last few weeks and around the SNP of to be fair, since the new First Minister was elected, there's been discussion about a changing of the guard and a moving on of the generations. And you mentioned there that 5 MPs, such as Stuart Hosey and Philippa Whitford, who are going to step down at the next general election, are now stepping back from the front benches. So do you think, is this another indication of that changing of the guard in the SNP that's been spoken about?
I mean, if you look at the reasons they gave, it's all valid, it's all personal reasons. I don't think it has anything to do with the leadership. I mean, Dr. Philippa Whitford is retiring. That's a very valid reason to go. Mary Black did go into depth about the toll that is taking on her, and Mary is actually deputy leader of the Westminster Group currently. So I did laugh at all the commentary that was trying to draw a link to the leadership that we have, or I suppose changing of the guard. I mean, people stand and drop out all the time, and this is just a normal thing that's happening in my eyes as well. So I know their reasons for standing down, and to me, they are believable and they're all pretty valid as well.
Thanks, Fatima. Now then, we'll move on and talk about the other reshuffle that took place today, because Keir Starmer announced his long-expected shadow cabinet reshuffle, and it proved more controversial than predicted. Angela Rayner will become the Deputy Prime Minister if Labour wins the next general election. She will also take on the Levelling Up brief. Starmer's changes have seen the fortunes of MPs on the Blairite right wing of the party prospering. Lisa Nandy, the former Shadow Levelling Up Secretary, is now taking on the International Development brief. That International Development Department is now part of the Foreign Office, but Nandy will still attend Shadow Cabinet. With Starmer seeking to get his favoured team in place before the election, Shabana Mahmood, who was Labour's National Campaigns Coordinator, takes over the Shadow Justice Secretary role held by Steve Reid since 2021. Liz Kendall, formerly a Shadow Health Minister, has replaced Jonathan Ashworth as the Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary. Also on the move were Lucy Powell, formerly Shadow Culture Secretary, who's been replaced by Thangnam Debonair, who was Shadow Leader of the Commons. In a direct swap, Powell becomes the Shadow Commons leader. Peter Kyle, who was Shadow Northern Ireland Secretary, takes over the previously vacant role shadowing the Science, Innovation and Technology Department, which was created only in February. Kyle is replaced by Hilary Benn, the veteran former minister. Backbencher Darren Jones, who chairs the Commons Business Committee, becomes Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury. Rachel Reeves, number 2, replacing Pat McFadden. McFadden was named as the Shadow Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster and National Campaign Coordinator. Ashworth becomes the Shadow Paymaster General, and that means he will remain as a full Shadow Cabinet Minister, and also will have a major role in campaigning. Nick Thomas Simmons, the Shadow International Trade Secretary, has also been moved to a more general role, becoming Minister without portfolio in the Cabinet Office. Reaction to the changes was initially muted amongst those affected. Rosina Aline Khan resigned as a Shadow Mental Health Minister, a departure understood to be connected to her frustration that the role would not now be given full Cabinet status. Preet Gill, replaced by Nandi at the International Development job, expressed some passive annoyance by reposting a tweet from a charity campaigner who said they were absolutely gutted that Gill had gone. Last October, Angela Rayner joked that "I'll definitely be Deputy Prime Minister, otherwise Cllr's got trouble," describing herself as John Prescott in a skirt to Starmer's Tony Blair. So Fatima, firstly, the UK Labour leader Keir Starmer promoted key figures who are regarded as being on the right of his party in a wide-ranging opposition reshuffle today. Is it possible, do you think, for the British Labour Party to move even further to the right than Starmer has already led it? I'm sorry,
I
I think
mean,
we may have lost you. You're still here. It's okay.
hello?
We can still hear you, Fatima.
Hello? I've frozen out there. No, but it's possible for them to move further to be honest, even struggling to distinguish between Labour and Tory government. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hello?
We can hear you,
Okay.
Fatima.
Comment and say that we are at a okay, excellent. We're in a situation where we are going to
We're clearly encountering some difficulties with Fatima's connection from West Hill. We'll ask Fatima to rejoin if she refreshes her browser
how
and
is
comes
that?
back
And what
in.
is
Oh, there we go. We'll ask Lisa. We'll ask Fatima to. Here we come. There we go.
I need to get onto the
So
council about my broadband, do I?
not at all. So I was saying, Fatima, is it possible for British Labour to move even further to the right than Keir Starmer has already led it?
What I was commenting on earlier is, to be honest, I think they are already there. The Labour that we knew has no longer exists, to be honest, and we're seeing examples up and down Scotland, across the UK, of Labour basically siding with the Tories constantly on policies that you'd expect them not to. So it's not clear where Labour stands in terms of Labour policies, but we're just constantly seeing examples of them going against their principles. Which is no shock considering Keir Starmer has basically promoted the right of Labour, and that's very clear in his cabinet reshuffle. So I do believe they're already there with Keir Starmer. Labour that we expected and Labour that we knew no longer exists. And I'm not sure how they think they're going to go into this general election offering an alternative where they're basically just a branch office of the Tory party. There's so many examples I can give from what's happening in local authorities up and down Scotland alone, yet alone UK-wide policies. I am very happy to go into that because an anti-strikes bill just really frustrated me, the stance that Labour took on it. So they're already there, to be honest, and it's a massive disappointment. And it's very clear that the only party with a chance to beat Labour across many seats in Scotland is the SNP, because we're offering what Labour voters traditionally want.
Thanks, Fatima. And I was going to talk about Scotland for a moment. Whilst there was a reshuffle today, the Keir Starmer's
Mhm.
Scotland team was unchanged. So that means lonely Ian Murray remains as Shadow Secretary of State. Liz Twist, who is the MP for Blaydon, which is in Tyne and Wear, is the Shadow Minister for Scotland. And Angela Smith, that's Baroness Angela Smith of Basildon in Essex, to you and me, she remains as the shadow spokesperson for Scotland in the House of Lords. So, what should we make of the fact that this team is largely based in is largely not based in Scotland, and also that it's not been changed?
It just goes to show that Scottish Labour is not a voice for Scotland, because what's happening is that Scottish Labour is being controlled by the UK government. It's centralised down in Westminster, and Scottish Labour is just a branch office. We barely hear Anna Sauer. It's almost as if he's been reduced to a non-entity. So Scottish people have every right to vote for Scottish Labour that will put the interests of Scottish voters and residents at heart. But that clearly this reshuffle shows that's not happening at all. And it just feeds into the wider narrative that in the grand scheme of things, when it comes to general elections, when it comes to this supposed union of equals, Scotland will remain a non-entity because there is this concerted effort and belief that Scotland should be controlled from Westminster rather than letting us lead or giving us the full powers to actually sort out the mess that they're creating. So there's absolutely no hope in Labour for any Scottish voter who wants a Labour politician to stand in their corner, considering how the organisation of Labour is happening, and we're seeing it play out.
Thanks, Fatima. We'll move on now because the SNP has challenged the Labour Party to back its calls for a £400 energy bill rebate for households from October. That's after Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, ruled out taxing the wealthy to fund cost of living support for millions of working families. Last week, the Labour Party Shadow Chancellor claimed, "I don't have any spending plans that require us to raise £12 billion, so I don't need a wealth tax or any of those things." But new analysis, published today, has revealed that it is almost the exact amount of money required to help millions of households across Scotland and the UK with an energy bill rebate this autumn and winter. The independent analysis by the House of Commons Library, commissioned by the SNP, found that reintroducing a £400 energy bill rebate for households from October 2023 to March 2024 would cost the UK government approximately £11.9 billion. The analysis also found that scrapping the two-child benefit cap and abolishing the bedroom tax would cost significantly less than £12 billion. There is a growing backlash against increases in energy bill standing charges and warnings that energy bills are likely to rise again this winter. Average daily standing charges have increased by more than 60% in the past 2 years, adding an extra £300 to energy bills, meaning that families who try to reduce their usage or even use no energy at all are still being hit with increasingly exorbitant daily charges. Cornwall Insights have warned that energy bills could increase again this winter. Typical household bills are still nearly double what they were in 2021 at £1,042 a year, compared to £1,923 a year following the most recent Ofgem energy price cap announcement. Cornwall Insights has warned that they could rise again this January to £2,032. Commenting, the SNP Social Justice spokesperson David Linden MP said, "Millions of families across Scotland are being hit hard in the pocket as a result of damaging Tory and Labour Party policies, including Brexit and austerity cuts, which have hammered household incomes and increased the cost of living in the UK. It's vital the UK government delivers urgent help for families by reintroducing a £400 energy bill rebate for all households from October. Families are seeing their incomes squeezed to the pips at the cost of mortgages, rents, and everyday goods rise, but Sunak and Starmer are doing nothing to help. It beggars belief that the pro-Brexit Labour Party is copying Tory cuts and refusing to help suffering families. You don't beat the Tories by becoming them, but that's exactly what Starmer and Reeves are doing." He went on, the SNP is the only party demanding real help for families and delivering progressive policies like the Scottish Child Payment to put money back into people's pockets. In contrast, the Tories and pro-Brexit Labour Party are taking money away and leaving families in the cold. So, Fatima, firstly, what's been your recent experience talking to people in the Northeast about the cost of energy this year? Has anything been turning up in your casework?
Absolutely. Well, I think the thing that's coming out is an absolute scandal because let's look at the Northeast, for example. We are an energy rich area. The whole of Scotland is, and the Northeast contributes massively to that. So it makes absolutely no sense how we could be in fuel poverty. And that just goes to show that how the politics of Westminster is creating this condition. As you mentioned, my colleague David Linden, he's absolutely right. Pro Brexit, the poverty inducing austerity cuts that the UK government engages in. And as a consequence, it has hit families hard when it shouldn't have. And a lot of the solution to that is these are our resources that could easily fix the problem, but the political choices they make have just reinforced it. It's man-made, and what we need is the powers to actually solve it and put our solutions forward. Because the politics of the UK government does not consider at all those who are marginalized, those who are living below the poverty line, just in general, because we're actually looking at situations where the choice for some is no heating or eating. People who once considered, like the area that I represent, is quite, people would consider a quite well-to-do area, but then we're seeing situations where people who once felt they were middle class are actually going into relative poverty. Those in absolute poverty, I just alluded to the fact that some are choosing between no heating or eating. And what's clear is that the UK government cannot abandon families anymore. And the solution they need to take up is, Stephen Flynn mentioned earlier, is the energy bill rebate. But we should not have to push hard for something to be done. Something that should be a priority for any government, to be honest. And if they don't want to do it, as I mentioned before, Scotland should have our full powers. Our energy-rich resources could bring us out of it, and it's avoidable. So if the UK government can move away from this pro-Brexit policies, austerity measures, which is having a disastrous impact in the midst of the cost of living crisis, we should not be in this problem at all. It's really frustrating, considering the resources that we have up here. And I think I can't speak about this without being really annoyed, to be honest, at this extent, because it is a political choice what's happening. And if you look at some of the case studies, it's actually heartbreaking, to be honest. And I feel a lot of these people find themselves in groups that are deliberately silenced, they're preferably unheard, and is why the SNP is the right party to actually support to these people, because we see it, we are working towards it, and we are considering the majority of the people who are not benefiting from any UK government policy that's basically geared towards the 1% of the population.
Thanks, Fatima. And let's look a little bit more at the current Westminster cost of living crisis, because the collapse of the UK's social contract is leaving millions of low-income families surviving, not living, and forced to endure unacceptable levels of poverty, according to an independent cross-party report. The Poverty Strategy Commission says poverty levels are too high and hardship is becoming more extreme. It warns of a more of the same approach to poverty in the future will fail. It estimates the broad annual cost of significantly reducing poverty in the UK at £36 billion, equivalent to £6,000 a year for 6 million families in poverty, a figure reached through a combination of benefits and wage increases and investment to lower housing and energy costs and also improved health services. The interim report of the Commission, which is published on Tuesday, seeks to put poverty reduction back on the party political agenda before the next general election. It is concerned at the lack of urgency from the two main UK parties over the scale and nature of poverty and society's failure to offer adequate protection to its poorest. The report says that not only have overall relative poverty levels barely budged at between 21 and 24% over the past 2 decades, but even in areas where some progress was made, such as reducing pensioner and single parent poverty, they have now started to go into reverse. It also highlights the rise in the proportion of people in poverty experiencing deep poverty, measured as at least 50% below the poverty line. It says that nearly a third, 31% of those officially in hardship, are in deep poverty and are struggling to buy sufficient food, energy and clothes, pay rent and meet other everyday bills. While the government often implies there is a social contract between the state and citizens, the Commission says in practice this does not exist. Its interim recommendations include a 5% uplift in benefits and wages for people in poverty, outside any inflation increases, although it says poverty cannot be tackled by raising incomes alone, and it highlights housing and childcare costs, the additional cost of disability, and energy and travel costs as areas to be addressed. The final report of the Commission is expected to be published at the end of this year. So, Fatima, the Commission member Miata Fanbula, who is the head of the New Economics Foundation, said, "In recent years, we've made little progress in tackling the causes of poverty, which are low wages, an inadequate social security system, and skyrocketing housing costs." So do you think, might Ms Fanbula start by talking to Lady Stroud, Lady Philippa Stroud, who's a Tory peer and former political advisor to Ian Duncan Smith when he was Welfare Secretary between 2010 and 2016, and who pulled this commission together? Should Ms Fanbula talk to Lady Stroud and also former Tory MP Stephen Crabb, who's also on the commission and is also a former Tory Work and Pensions Secretary of State, and who were both instrumental in causing low wages, causing an inadequate social security system, and skyrocketing housing costs?
I'm so sorry, Andrew. I got kicked out, so I've just walked in.
That's not a problem if you're back. I was talking
Yeah.
about how there are two members of the commission who have been instrumental in
Mhm.
creating the low wages, the inadequate social security system, and skyrocketing housing costs, which this commission now says are the cause of the ever increasing deep poverty in the UK. Lady Stroud was a former political advisor to Ian Duncan Smith when he was Welfare Secretary, and she's on the commission. And the Tory MP Stephen Crabb was a Work and Pension Secretary of State as well. So should the Commission start by looking at itself and looking at some of its members for the causes and the solutions to the poverty being experienced in the UK at the moment?
To be honest, a lot of things just now is political choices, and there is a need for internal reform, especially when it comes to advising the UK government. So I would recommend that there needs to be this constant reevaluation, this need for lived experiences to form a massive part of what's being decided. I mean, we need to get out there to people that are really struggling to get through and get by. So I do believe that maybe there is a change in strategy in terms of how we approach this and how we gather data and the people that we speak to. I haven't had a chance to commission report in depth, but I have listened to a bit of what you're saying. And when it comes to issues of poverty reduction, it is very important that we have these lived experiences leading the way when it comes to policies and politics. And what I see happening when it comes to UK government, even if they're advised by any commission, we do need to look at the fact that the UK government is responsible for implementing these decisions. And they don't advise, they do tend to take a different approach. So I do think we need to look at who's implementing as well, because it's up to them to also make a decision based on the information that they get. I don't think I can put the blame on the commission's report entirely. I do think that there is need for a better working relationship to be able to address this. And at the heart of it is the people who are suffering the most. And that would be my comment there.
Thanks, Fatima. And we'll look at this issue from another perspective now for a moment, because the SNP's by-election candidate Katie Loudon has committed to introducing a private member's bill to abolish the two-child benefit cap and rape clause within the first 100 days of becoming an MP. The policy, introduced by the Tories, has hit 1,620 children in Rutherglen and Hamilton West and 80,936 children across Scotland. The Labour Party has refused to commit to abolishing the two-child cap if they are elected at the next general election. Ms Loudon said that if the Labour Party in Scotland is serious about tackling child poverty, they should have no reservations about publicly backing her private member's bill. The SNP published new research today, commissioned from the House of Commons Library, which shows that scrapping the two-child benefit cap and the bedroom tax would cost a fraction of the £12 billion which could be raised by taxing the wealthy to fund cost of living support for families. Last week, the Labour Party Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, said that she does not have any spending plans that will require a Labour government to raise £12 billion, so she does not need to bring in a wealth tax. Previously, Rachel Reeves claimed that she couldn't scrap the two-child cap or the bedroom tax because it's not something at the moment we have the finances to be able to afford to do. The cost of scrapping both policies is now estimated to be between £1.85 and £2.7 billion for 2023-24. Commenting, Katie Loudon said, "Within the first 100 days of becoming an MP, I pledged to introduce a private member's bill to abolish the abhorrent two-child benefit cap and rape clause. This is a simple yet crucial act that would show constituents that I am willing to not only stand up for them, but to protect the most vulnerable in our society. If the Labour Party in Scotland is serious about tackling child poverty, they should have no reservations about publicly backing my plans to introduce this bill as an MP." So Fatima, the policy introduced by the Tories and backed by the Labour Party has hit 1,600 children in the constituency and nearly 81,000 across Scotland, according to the Child Poverty Action Group. That's an astonishing number of young people and their families who are being punished by these policies, isn't it?
And is one so the figures Scotland wide, for example, we're talking of over 80,000, and that's 80,000 too many people, to be honest. We should never be in this position. And as Katie mentioned, Labour should be backing this. And if the Labour Party are the Labour Party that we expect them to be, and they are for poverty reduction, they will need to back Katie's private members' bill elected. Because what I'm sure see is a repeat of what they usually do, which is the Bain principle. They will just not vote for a policy that's the SNP policy. And Labour cannot continue to claim they are for the working class, for those and for anyone struggling to get through the cost of living crisis, if that's the approach that they're still going to take. And it's, they just, what they're going to do is allow Tory poverty-inducing policies to get through. I mean, the most revealing aspect of this practice, this Bain principle they seem to catch themselves into, is that they are willing to even go against their own policies. It's a political choice they are making. The figures are there, the figures are stark. You're looking at over 80,000 children who should not be struggling, who we're basically disadvantaging in life. The solution is there, it's scrapping the two-child poverty cap. Excuse me. And, a lot of the time, some of the Tory arguments are, well, family size, etc. Some of them they managed to go through that argument without explicitly stating it, but circumstances for many people change. I saw a really informative commentary by someone online who said that, look, she was able to support her family for a while, her and her husband. Her husband died. And what she's asking for is just a helping hand till she gets back on her feet. This the policy is affecting her just now. These are the people that we are not helping. These are the people that we are essentially punishing and Labour policies. And Labour, to be honest, I don't have any faith that they will back this, which is going to be a further shame on them, but they should be. Because I've already watched them going against the anti-strike bill using this Bain principle. And what they've done is a Labour Party who is in fundamentals, who should be supporting fundamental workers' rights, just sat on their hands. And there is a risk that they might do this again for children. So when Katie gets in, they should do the right thing and follow the Labour politics as well and back Katie in actually helping these families if they're serious about poverty reduction, if they're serious about child poverty, and if they're serious about making sure that children in Scotland actually get the best start and a fair start in life.
Thanks, Fatima. Now, let's look at the cost of living crisis from another perspective, because about 7,000 businesses are likely to fail every quarter in 2024 as high interest rates cause financial strain and the UK economy enters recession. That's according to a think tank. The Centre for Economics and Business Research said debt taken on during the pandemic, higher borrowing costs, and the cost of living crisis would drive an increasing number of businesses under, particularly in the retail and hospitality sectors. There were more than 6,700 business insolvencies in Britain in the second quarter of 2023. That's more than double in a typical quarter during the pandemic, when many businesses were largely protected from insolvency through a range of support measures. Insolvencies over the period were 50% higher than the same quarter pre-pandemic in 2019, the CEBR said, and they averaged 4,100 on a quarterly basis between 2015 and 2019. The Bank of England has raised interest rates 14 times since the end of 2021, heaping pressure on indebted households and businesses. The CEBR is forecasting 2 more rate rises in the current cycle, with the bank rate peaking at 5.75%. This means the worst is yet to come in terms of borrowing costs, quite apart from the impact of fixed-term loans made when interests were lower being rolled over at new, higher rates, the think tank said. It added, looking ahead to the future, CEBR expects the rate of business insolvencies to remain high as interest rates continue to rise, pushing up debt repayments to unsustainable levels for some businesses. Our models suggest that there could be 7,000 insolvencies per quarter on average across 2024. Furthermore, the CEBR is forecasting a recession in the UK with 2 consecutive quarters of contraction in GDP in the fourth quarter of 2023 and the first quarter of 2024. So, Fatima, the CEBR expects the rate of business insolvencies to remain high as interest rates continue to rise, pushing up debt repayments to unsustainable levels for some. So that makes it plain, doesn't it? The only policy which this Tory government is prepared to pursue in order to address sky-high inflation is to cause a recession and put lots of people out of work as businesses collapse.
Well, I'm not surprised it's a Tory government. The Tory government does not advocate for the workers, for the people who are struggling, basically the majority of the economy. So their politics is all wrong, their policy is all wrong. Even during the pandemic, we pushed for more. As an SNP politician, I am aware of SNP policies that pushed for them to do more during the pandemic, and what they did was the bare minimum. So I'm not even going to give them any praise for what they think they've done. Businesses still struggled. Businesses were still pressured under enormous strain. The UK government could only continue to, when Boris was a prime minister, reward their friends with contracts, with inflated contracts, throw away billions with failed PPE contracts that could have easily have been supporting our businesses. So it's just misplaced money, misplaced priorities, and it's no surprise that what they're proposing doesn't reach the working class, does not reach those who are struggling in poverty, does not help to move people out of poverty. But actually, what we'll probably see, as we've always seen, is some of their chums at the top, their cronies, actually being helped out instead.
Thanks, Fatima. Now then, we'll move on. The clock is against us this evening because the social media company formerly known as Twitter has been accused in a revised civil US lawsuit of helping Saudi Arabia commit grave human rights abuses against its users, including by disclosing confidential user data at the request of Saudi authorities at a much higher rate than it ever has for the US, UK, or Canada. The lawsuit was brought last May against X, as Twitter is now known, by Arij al-Sarhan, the sister of a Saudi aid worker who was forcibly disappeared and then later sentenced to 20 years in jail. It centres on the events surrounding the infiltration of the California company by 3 Saudi agents, 2 of whom were posing as Twitter employees in 2014 and 2015, which ultimately led to the arrest of al-Sarhan's brother Abdul Rahman and the exposure of the identity of thousands of anonymous Twitter users, some of whom were later reportedly detained and tortured as part of the Saudi government's crackdown on dissent. Lawyers for al-Sarhan updated their claim last week to include new allegations which say that because of financial considerations and efforts to keep close ties to the then Saudi government, a top investor in the company, Twitter, under the leadership of the then chief executive Jack Dorsey, either willfully ignored or had knowledge of the Saudi government's campaign to identify critics and provided assistance to the Saudi kingdom. The new legal filing comes days after Human Rights Watch condemned a Saudi court for sentencing a man to death, based solely on his Twitter and YouTube activity, which it called an escalation of the government's crackdown on freedom of expression. The convicted man, Muhammad al-Ghamdi, 54, is the brother of a Saudi scholar and government critic living in exile in the UK. Saudi court records, examined by Human Rights Watch, showed that al-Hamdi was accused of having 2 accounts which had a total of 10 followers combined. Both accounts had fewer than 1,000 tweets combined and contained retweets of well-known critics of the government. So, Fatima, lawyers for al-Sarhan updated their claim last week to include new allegations about how Twitter willfully ignored or had knowledge of the Saudi government's campaign to target critics. But because of financial considerations, the Saudi government's a top investor in Twitter, they provided assistance to the kingdom. So is this another case of simply following the money when human rights are being threatened or damaged?
Social media is a problem when it comes to policing, to be honest, and actually creating in conditions of safety. And if we're looking at how Elon Musk is running Twitter, it is something that we need to look on with great concern and great fear. He's clearly someone who, to be honest, in my opinion, is chasing the wrong procedures and wrong policy direction for Twitter. I mean, we see the conversation a lot online about people feeling less safe, about people feeling more vulnerable because of his policies and politics that's coming into Twitter. And it is a bit dangerous. Frankly, it is dangerous to actually see this situation plan out. Twitter has been highly political when it comes to money as well. So it's something that we should be really concerned about. It's something that we should look into actually creating, like even in the UK arena as well. We should be putting a lot of focus onto legislation and policies that actually help keep our people safe on Twitter and the usage as well. Elon Musk, I am not happy or comfortable with the direction he's moving in, with the alliances he's forming, with the various governments and the direction he supports. And we all miss the old Twitter. Well, I seem to keep calling it Twitter. We all miss it. We all miss Twitter. And what X has become is problematic, highly problematic. And I haven't seen much about this story, but I have seen the damaging consequences it has led to, actually putting people's safety at risk. And it's something that needs to seriously be considered and addressed in terms of the direction that Twitter is moving under Elon Musk.
Thanks, Fatima. And we'll come back to Scotland for our final item this evening, because the First Minister has said that the Scottish Government investment in the years ahead will be prioritised on measures that help grow Scotland's economy, tackle poverty, and deliver high-quality public services. Speaking ahead of tomorrow's publication of his first programme for government, Humza Yousaf said that by supporting businesses and building a well-being economy focused on well-paid jobs and growth, Scotland can unleash entrepreneurial talent and generate new investment that helps deliver targeted measures to lift families and communities out of poverty. The programme for government will also set Scotland on a path towards tackling some of the big issues facing the country. It will ensure that responding to the climate crisis is at the heart of government, while also taking the next steps in reforming and modernising public services to help tackle the aftermath of the pandemic. The First Minister said, "The challenges we face, including the cost of living crisis, the impacts of the UK government's hard Brexit, and pandemic recovery, are significant, but we have strong foundations that we can build upon to grasp opportunities and deliver real change. During these challenging times, the people of Scotland need a government that is on their side. In the coming days, we will outline our measures to support businesses and communities, to unleash potential and promote entrepreneurship, helping provide well-paid jobs right across Scotland and boosting national and local economies." He continued, "Our focus on boosting economic growth will enable us to invest more in anti-poverty measures and support our vital public services, protecting the most vulnerable in society and raising the standard of living for everyone." So, Fatima, the programme for government this year will build on the prospectus paper New Leadership, A Fresh Start, which was published in April shortly after the First Minister was appointed. And it sets out his three national missions: equality, opportunity, and community. How important is it that the programme for government is characterised in that way, Fatima, with equality first?
I think it's very true to what we're trying to achieve in efforts towards a fairer, brighter, more progressive, more inclusive Scotland for all, and where everyone in Scotland has a life that they have reason to value. And we do that with actually putting equalities at the heart of every policy, with mainstreaming equality measures in the heart of every policy. That's really important to ensure that all our citizens are actually enjoying the best opportunities to the best of their ability. So I do think the start of this sets the right tone. It really captures the sort of Scotland that we already are, you know, the Scotland of the Cllr Street as well. It really captures the Scotland that we are, which is a massive contrast to what the UK government has consistently offered. And I think one thing that I want to mentioned that in this program, I noticed that another tone that we had to take was actually mitigating the poverty-inducing policies, the austerity cuts that have been imposed by us, by the Westminster government, in order for us to achieve it. We should not be in this position where we are constantly battling with policies that have been thrown our way by a government that we did not elect. For us to be able to achieve the vision that we want with full powers and full resources we should have access to in the first place. But I do believe that leading this way is the right tone for us to take, and it is the right step in the direction that we want to build a fairer, brighter, and more progressive and more greener future for us all. And it does really start with mainstreaming equality. And I think when people hear equality, they think it's just, and making everyone like, they just think it's taking away rights of some groups, or they think it's just all about, it's a very multidimensional concept of equality, and it includes assisting, various groups. And when equality is actually mainstreamed into different policies, we are in a position where no one gets left behind. It benefits everyone. So I hope that we can actually emphasize this tone that some people fear, that it somehow removes rights for other groups, or it somehow sets back other groups as well. But no, equality, mainstreaming equality, actually ensures that anyone can realise a Scotland that they have reason to value, and realise opportunities that they can to the maximum ability that they have.
Thanks, Fatima. That was a great summing up there, because I'm afraid that's all that we have time for this evening. In making these programmes, Broadcasting Scotland depends on the generosity of viewers and others who value our distinctive approach to news, current affairs and culture. Please help us to continue to make these programmes, to develop the station and to make new programmes. Our programmes will always be free to view, but if you can afford £5 a month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. Our need to reach our £30,000 target to pay our bills is still really pressing. However, the generosity of our supporters has given us a little more time. We have now raised over £16,000 and we are able to continue making programmes for the next few weeks, but our need to raise the remaining £14,000 is really, really urgent. To everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment as a Broadcasting Scotland supporter, thank you very much. There are other ways in which you can contribute to our work. If you would like to volunteer to work with Broadcasting Scotland, either behind the scenes or in front of the cameras, or in any other way that helps our work and promotes the station, then please visit our website at www.broadcastingscotland.scot and send us a message there. You can find us on Twitter and Blue Sky at BroadcastScot. Please like and retweet us there. And you can also find us on Facebook by searching for Broadcasting Scotland. When you're watching us on YouTube, it would be great if you would like and subscribe to Broadcasting Scotland on that platform. We will be back at 7 p.m. sharp tomorrow evening for the next edition of Scotland at 7, so please come and join us then. I'd like to say thank you to everyone who's been watching us this evening, and of course to say a very special thanks to our very special guest, Councillor Fatima Joji. Thanks, Fatima. I think Fatima may have frozen once again. On this day in 1955, British TV newsreaders were seen in vision for the first time. The first was BBC's Kenneth Kendall. I suspect that he thought that such a thing would never catch on. Please look after yourselves and please have a very peaceful evening. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Lewis McGlynn.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Saoirse Healy.
Hello and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. My name is Donald C. Stewart. Broadcasting Scotland is Scotland's independent broadcaster, providing factual news, reporting on the issues important to the people of Scotland.
We are committed to public service broadcasting, and with your support, we will produce even more programmes.
Provide opportunities for young people interested in media production and broadcasting, and challenge preconceptions of what Scottish media looks like, amplifying Scotland's voice and reflecting its communities.
We can already deliver high-quality live news, and we will create the highest quality programmes for you to enjoy. But we can only do that with your support.
So please subscribe to and share our channel or donate to Broadcasting Scotland via the link in the description. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.